On the battlefield, every dead soldier's uniform was stripped off. They were loaded onto trains and sent back to factories behind the lines. Workers washed the blood out in huge pools of water, then carefully stitched up every bullet hole and tear. After drying, a brand new uniform was ready again. Then it would be handed to the next group of recruits. When a new recruit named Paul first enlisted, he noticed someone else's name written inside his uniform. He thought the officer had given him the wrong one, so he hurried over to get it exchanged. But the officer simply ripped the name tag off and casually told him. The last guy returned it because it didn't fit. Paul believed him completely. He excitedly took the uniform and imagined himself becoming a war hero. But just one day earlier, he was still a student. At the time, World War I was raging on. To keep pushing forward against the enemy, the country had already lost countless soldiers. Resources and manpower were running out, so the government turned its attention to high school students. An officer stood at the podium giving a fiery speech. He told them this was the moment for young men to become heroes. In just a few weeks, they would march straight into Paris, fight for the emperor, for God, and for your country. Paul and his classmates were completely fired up. They signed up full of passion and pride. They thought glory and medals were waiting for them. But what was really waiting for them was hunger and death. Soon, Paul and the other recruits were sent toward the battlefield by truck. But before they even reached the front line, they were stopped by medics. Too many wounded soldiers needed evacuation, so the recruits had to walk the rest of the way. By the time they finally reached the trenches, a heavy storm had already started pouring down. Their very first order was to scoop water out of the trenches using their helmets. The 4 recruits were disappointed. This wasn't the heroic battlefield they had imagined. Before long, their hands went completely numb from the cold. Just then, an older soldier named Kat walked over. He told them to stick their hands in their pants to stay warm, while warning them that war never gives anyone a chance to breathe. That night, Paul and his friends stood guard together. Not far away, a dying French soldier lay face down in the mud. Paul eagerly pulled the trigger. It was the first shot he had ever fired in war. It was also the first time he had killed someone, but he didn't even have time to feel scared. The very next second, a bullet from the distance knocked him flat to the ground. Luckily, his helmet took the hit and saved his life. For the first time, Paul truly realized just how close death really was. Kat immediately warned him, "After firing a shot, you move right away, or the enemy will lock onto your position." But Paul's careless shot had already exposed the entire unit. As a flare shot into the sky, the dark night lit up in an instant. Then came a storm of artillery raining down everywhere. Everyone scrambled into the bunker to survive the bombardment. Only at that moment did Paul and the other recruits truly understand how brutal war was. One of the recruits completely lost his mind. Screaming, he tried to rush outside and fight the enemy himself. But the second he stepped out of the bunker, a shell blew him to pieces. At the same time, the crumbling bunker collapsed around them. The next morning, Paul was finally pulled out of the rubble by his comrades. He stood there in shock, unable to describe the horror in front of him. But the war still hadn't stopped. An officer tossed him a small bag and ordered him to collect the dog tags from dead soldiers, because only then could the dead soldiers leave behind a name someone would remember.